Good morning, viewers and listeners, to our British Business Podcast series here in Cornwall. I'm delighted to welcome Melissa Thorpe from SpacePort Cornwall, and we're going to find out all about Melissa and her journey to this point, but then we're going to go into deep dive about the Spaceport Cornwall's project and what's happening right now. It's really exciting and I can't wait to get started. So welcome, Melissa, and thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here.
So where did it all start for you in business?
Yeah, I guess you have to kind of go right back and kind of those early seeds that were planted. I grew up in a very small town, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Well, definitely in the middle of nowhere in Canada and British Columbia. And, you know, it was very traditional industry. It was logging, fishing, ranching. And I didn't really have, my parents weren't business people at all. My mum was a park ranger and my dad fought forest fires using water bombing airplanes. So I didn't grow up around entrepreneurs at all. But I guess the early seeds for me was looking at how to solve problems with, you know, communities. I really lived in this really tight-knit community that had to pull together when winters became rough, when wildfires came through and things like that. So I saw communities come together, and I also saw some things that could help communities from businesses that would come in and help. And would come in and provide a solution. And I guess you don't realize it when you're little, but that's probably where I kind of connected my passion for communities and thinking about how we could use maybe technology or corporations to come and help. And I saw big corporations come in with mining and with logging. And there's always, back then, was kind of a negative connotation around them with natural resources, for instance. But I actually saw the other side. I saw the jobs that they provided to struggling communities.
And what age were you when you saw that?
You know, I remember distinctly remembering driving into my town, which was on this beautiful lake, and there was quite a distinctive bluff, so almost a mountainside on one side of it. And in Canada, logging practice is sometimes what's called clear cutting. So they literally cut an entire forest down, and then they plant it and it grows again. And this big corporation came in and clear cutted one side of that mountain, and it was hugely scarring looking. And I remember the negativity going around the communities at the time about the look and feel. And this is long before a lot of the environmental movement was happening, but what I then saw, I remember new kids showing up in our class and speaking to them. And these kids had never been to school before. And they were coming into school for the first time because their dad got a job for this company. And they suddenly had to go to school. And they were so excited to be there. And they were so excited that their dad had a job. And so there's always this balance, isn't there? But I guess for me, it's just that early day in a very kind of industrial, natural resource-based community. I saw the other side of what these corporations were doing. And you need to always look at both sides. And I think that's something I've carried through.
It's almost visionary.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's also just like there's always two sides to every story. And you know, I think with globalization, you know, that was the big theme of my university years as an economist, looking at the good and the bad of globalization and the movement of businesses and people and the pros and cons of that. And, you know, I think looking at the time, there was all those kind of protests happening around Seattle and against big corporations and against this kind of globalization movement. But I, as an economist, could again see the opportunities that were coming to areas that never had opportunity before. So it really influenced, I guess, my approach to something like the space industry now, because, you know, you see the good and the bad. And I always try with anything in business to look at both sides and where people are coming from. Because I think then today it's not black and white anymore.
No.
And it's not like you can just come into an area and ignore the community. You've got to engage nowadays with social media, with all the movements that are out there. You've got to engage And I'm not here to, I guess, bring everybody along for the journey, but you need to at least engage. And so in order to do that, you have to understand everybody's point of view.
So when you finished university, did you go into business?
Yes, so I was determined to be a pilot. Like, I wanted to fly like my dad. I was like, that's what I wanted to do. But my eyesight was not good enough. So I was like, right, how do I get out of this small town? And the other thing I loved was the idea of traveling. And I ended up in economics at the University of British Columbia. And I did my degree there in economics. And then my dreams, I took a gap year after my degree, traveled and did some voluntary work around Asia, working with kind of microcredit finance for local communities in some parts of Asia.
How long ago was that?
That was in 2008. I did that. And then I came back, and my dream school was always the London School of Economics. That was where I wanted to end up. So I applied to do my master's there, absolutely not ever believing that it was going to happen. And then I'll never forget, like, I got into another master's program in Canada, and I'd actually started it. And about 2 weeks into it, I got the letter from LSE, because the university starts so much later over here. So I got this, and I had this decision. I was like, no, I've got to do it. So I moved over to London and did my master's in economics. And that was, I guess, my real start of the kind of business journey.
You make that sound so simple. So you were over there in Canada, and you were in university, and you got a letter from London, and you decided within days that you'd just up and leave. Is that correct? I think
within hours.
Within hours?
Yeah. It was hard because I had actually moved across the country with a friend to start my master's program in Canada. And so from the West Coast to the East Coast. And we had just settled into our new place. We had moved furniture all across the country. And I just remember getting this letter, or it was an email actually, and going, oh no, how do I do this? And I just called my mom, and my mom, she's everything. And she was just like, you've got to do it. You have to do it. And wow. I had to have that really hard conversation with my friend to say, look, I've got in, and I've got to do it. And I did. And within 2 days, I, was packed up, getting the visa sorted and over to LSE. So
what happened after LSE? Did it all go well for you? And then,
yeah.
So then it was like...
LSE is an interesting place. And hopefully some of your audience are, probably alumni or have been there themselves. It's a city campus, and to be from Canada going to a city campus in central London. And the thing about LSE and a master's program there was the professors are world class. They were flying in from Berkeley, every other week. They were, the students were, heads of states' children and nieces and nephews, and royal family nieces and nephews. And from small town Canada to be around these people, it was really intimidating.
Wow.
And then I was like, nah, it's okay. Everybody, it was lovely. And I had a great year. It was really good. I really learned a lot. The professors, they're the ones that write books that I used to read. So it's amazing.
So as you were going through that journey there, and you were coming towards the end of it, had you already planned out what you were going to do next? Because I think a lot of viewers and listeners are interested a lot about the journey of a business person and how they get where they get to and what happens in those steps. Sometimes they're crucial. I mean, that little bit there, that snippet that you've just given us, that 2 days you were in Canada in the university, and then you decided that actually you got this opportunity. Yeah. Sometimes you have to take those opportunities. What happened next?
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't really know. I knew I was interested in economic development. I knew I got quite niche in my master's in regards to, I focused on aerospace clusters around the world. So I was really interested in aviation and aerospace.
Okay.
So I had that kind of, I wanted to be around aircraft and airplanes. That was my, from a little girl, that was what I loved.
Because of dad?
Because of dad, and because, of where I was able to go with him. It was back in the day where you could kind of take your kids to remote smoke jumping bases, and nobody batted an eyelid.
Wow.
And so for me, yeah, I was always there. That kind of thing that I loved was airplanes. So I kind of went into this niche, and then suddenly, and you get this with, I guess, university masters, like, what are you going to do with that? Do you know what I mean? You become almost so. But I kind of graduated. I had a choice to make. The well-worn path into the city was basically right there for most LSE graduates. So that's pretty much what most of them do. And a lot of my friends from that time are still in the city doing amazing things as well. But I had been coming down to Cornwall every other weekend. My partner at the time was based down here, so I would come down to visit, and I absolutely loved it. My grandmother was born in Surrey, and she used to holiday as a child in St. Ives, so she would tell me when I was little about this magical place called Cornwall. And so, the fact that I was able to come down here on the weekends, and I absolutely loved it. I really had an affinity. It felt slightly like home. So I kind of came out of university and I went, okay, I'm going to give myself 3 months to see if I can find something in Cornwall. If not, I'll go and see if I can, I'll just stay in London. And yeah, I came down and I was on the train on the way down, and it stopped at the train station in St. Austell. And I looked out the window and there was a billboard, and it was like talking about economic development in Cornwall. And this is when the European funding was really going. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I Googled the website, and they had a job posting for somebody to help them attract business to Cornwall in and around the aviation industry. And I was like, okay. And
that's a great fit.
Yeah.
In fact, it was made for you.
Yeah, and I got it.
Wow.
So that was the start of me being down here. And so that was 2010. I got the job, and not space related, but yeah, working as a consultant on the airport that I'm still, at.
Sure.
And that was kind of my journey to Cornwall.
Fantastic. What happened next? Because I know what's coming, and I can't wait to get there. But were there any other influential pieces in order for you to get to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I very much began working at the airport with actually my predecessor, and him and I were brought in to help the airport transition from the military to a civilian airport.
Okay.
And our role was working on the business development side of bringing non-passenger businesses to the site. So we were looking at how can we build facilities and have kind of a proposition for aviation businesses to come and set up in Cornwall at this airport. And those early days, it was interesting because I was off all around the world going to air shows and conferences. And I mean, I was in my 20s and female, and it was a very male-dominated sector.
I bet it was.
Aviation and aerospace. But I could talk the talk. Like, I grew up around aircraft, and my other half at the time was in the military. And so I understood that side of it and the defense side. So I kind of had, I loved that in those early days of surprising people with what came out of my mouth when they probably had some preconception.
Wow.
And so I was busy doing that for quite a few years, just working. And then it slowly took on a project looking at new technologies and testing new technologies at this incredible asset that we have. And I really got into unmanned systems, so big drones, basically, and looking at could we use this airport to launch them for cargo, for instance. So if we had a unmanned cargo aircraft going from the UK to the US. So I started to look at that feasibility, and then SpacePort came knocking.
Wow. So SpacePort came knocking, and what happened? How much did you know about it at that point?
Nothing. It was totally out of the blue.
Because I know our viewers and listeners outside of Cornwall, maybe even inside Cornwall, will not really know much. Yeah. I certainly have tried to hold off any research because I want to be like our viewers and listeners who will know virtually nothing. And I didn't know anything. And, and lo and behold, on Wednesday morning when we arrived, I put the radio on and all of a sudden you're being interviewed on radio. It was like, wow, this is really quite big for Cornwall.
Yeah, it's been quite a roller coaster. So we were busy doing our thing at the airport, and I'll never forget it. It was basically an email. This is probably July 2014.
Okay.
An email came in from the UK Space Agency saying your airport's been shortlisted as a potential spaceport. And we all just kind of went, that's very strange. There's always been this kind of myth about the airport being a secondary landing site for the shuttle program. And we had kind of started to look at kind of the next iteration of what those unmanned systems testing might be. And that could be maybe looking at things for the space industry in the future. So we started to do a little bit of like dipping our toe in that water, but nothing serious. And we had the Bloodhound supersonic car testing on the runway, which has a massive rocket on the back of it. And I always remember saying, what if we just pointed that up and see, but again, nothing to kind of hint that this is going to happen. And this email came in saying we were shortlisted, and it was kind of a moment of, is this real? Is this serious? And we had to do a few months of kind of not weeks actually, because we had Farnborough Air Show a few weeks after we were shortlisted. And they were like, you better get ready because it's being announced at Farnborough. You're going to have media. And I was like, I had to do really quick briefings for the politicians down here who were like, what are you talking about? Laughing, pasties in space, that kind of stuff. And
when you say they gave you that or the email came, where did it come from? Who decided?
The UK Space Agency, so UKSA. So they had been working on a Launch UK program looking at how do we develop a launch capability in the UK. We have all these satellites we build here. Every single one of them gets shipped overseas to launch at the minute. And they wanted. Is
there a reason for that?
Well, we just can't launch them here.
Okay.
There's nowhere to launch in the UK.
Because of size, because of scale?
Lots of different reasons. I think the marketplace is always been kind of sided with Russia, Kazakhstan, and the US because they've been doing it for 50 years.
Okay.
So it's always kind of the given. That's where you send your satellites to launch. The cost to enter that launch game is really high. Well, traditionally it's been really high. To set up a spaceport, to set a launch capability is a lot, is a lot of money until now. And that's where we come in. But so they kind of picked all these sites around the UK that they thought could be a launch location. It was desk-based exercises, things like no residential build-up around it, access to the sea. For ours, it was a long runway. So things like that, just really basic criteria.
Okay.
And then it was announced at Farnborough, and the media just went, kind of mad for it. And so we were at Farnborough with all this media saying, you're going to be a spaceport. And yeah, those early days.
What did that feel like?
Surreal, I guess. It was hard because we were being kind of lumped with this responsibility without being able to properly look into what it actually meant at that point in time. So we got through Farnborough, and then we just went, right, we're going to take some time to first of all, is this something that Cornwall would be interested in? Is it something that we could develop? Is it, what's the cost associated? How much changes to the infrastructure do we need? And then finally, who would actually use it? So we took probably about the next 6 months to just kind of do it on the side. It wasn't my full-time job. It was just kind of looking at it alongside everything else we were doing. And then that changed when the UK Space Agency asked us to come forward with proposals. They had a pot of money, and they asked all the spaceports, potential spaceports, to come forward with some proposals. And that was my first kind of real full-time task with Spaceport, was writing that kind of bid.
How many other spaceports are there?
I think there's 8 altogether.
In the UK?
In the UK, there was 8 initially announced. Some of them have kind of dropped off, but there's probably 4 of us that are still progressing.
Sure.
There's probably 2 that I would say will happen us and one other in the next kind of few years. So there are different levels.
Okay.
And yeah, it was just really early days looking at that and then putting this kind of bid in. And the bid had to be with a potential user of the spaceport. They didn't want build it, they will come. They wanted a business case with an operator to come forward to government to say, this is how we'll use the site. This is how it's going to make money.
And who would a user be? What would that look like?
So a launch operator. So in our instance,
are you able to say who that is and who?
Yeah, well, it's Virgin.
Okay.
So one of Richard Branson's space companies. So we're working with Virgin Orbit, and that's we pulled that business case together. And took that to government.
How long ago did you take that to government?
That was in 2017, I think it was, that we actually went forward with it.
So 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And since then, how's it been progressing and what's happening?
So, that initial kind of funding bid, and then it was a lot of toing and froing about raising the investment for it.
Okay.
So several years of kind of lobbying Westminster. I did a lot of that, and then it was trying to raise the capital and revenue that we needed to get the project to a place where we could launch. And so up until even in the pandemic, we were still getting the investment.
And are you able to say what size of investment you were looking for initially?
Yeah. So our launch is going to be about just shy of 20 million, which isn't much in the space industry.
My guess is that most lay people will not have a clue how much money is spent. My guess is that people will think, actually, it could be like a bottomless pit of spending money. Is it like that? I mean, 20 million seems small in comparison to the big things that you see in NASA.
We are very different because we're an airport. It's all there. Our launch pad is a runway. It's not a traditional.
So there's no infrastructure to have to build.
We didn't have to. We could have launched probably from day one. We have a long enough runway to handle a 747, which is what Virgin Orbit used to launch to space.
Okay.
We have done a few bits and pieces to infrastructure just to future-proof it and make it more efficient. The majority of that funding has gone into bringing that technology across to the UK from the US, which has a lot of legal costs associated, a little bit of infrastructure, and then setting up kind of the licensing and regulatory environment in the UK. The UK's never launched before. So we've spent a few years now on the license side. So the government stood up the regulator, the Civil Aviation Authority, last year, and they had to write a brand new piece of legislation to launch in the UK safely. That took a lot of time, money as well to get that ready to go. And we've then had to submit that license, which is the one thing we're still waiting for to come back.
So part of your skill sets, part of your role is, it seems that there are many facets to your role. Mm-hmm. Did you then have to learn about legal bidding, legal infrastructure, legal contracting? Because those are quite important things.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer.
Sure.
I use lawyers. I have had to learn a lot in this role. It's, I guess the fundamentals of economics are still there, and it's given me an amazing foundation to understand kind of the market and the business practices. The political side of everything has been a really interesting kind of journey for me. But then, the regulatory side, the safety cases, the legal side of everything, insurance is all new and it's all learning. But to be honest, a lot of that's brand new to the entire space industry.
Okay, so it's not just you and they know about it.
Space law, space insurance, all of that is, especially here in the UK, is new. Everybody is learning together in one way. So it's been it's been really good, I would say. It's been frustrating and hard, but my knowledge in quite an up and coming sector of like the space industry and launch is just growing.
So what can people do now to look out for this? So do you have a website?
we have everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you name some of the things so that people can go
on? Yeah, absolutely. So we are really proud of the space industry is shockingly bad at communicating to the average person. Unless you're a space geek or into space, which to be honest, I wasn't. I like airplanes. I wasn't massively into space. But yeah, the communication to average people has just been really bad. And so we, at SpacePort Cornwall, we try and do it very differently.
Okay.
So yeah, you can check us out online. We have Twitter at Space Cornwall, or I'm on Twitter at Mel's Good Space. We have Instagram, same handles. We're just about to set up TikTok. Not me, because I can't even bring myself to do that. But our young interns are doing that for us. And we have a website which has loads of information. We have a YouTube channel. It's all there. So spaceportcornwall.com is the website. You should be able to find lots of our videos. But we're all over, and we pop up in very weird and wonderful places.
And we were talking outside before we came into the studio. It's imminent, isn't it? Something could be around the corner within days. Is that what you're saying? Yes.
So fast forward from getting that kind of funding with Virgin Orbit and the licensing, and we are pretty much ready to go. In the next few weeks, we have all the operations moving from California to Cornwall. Wow. They're based out in Mojave and Long Beach in California. So they're just about to ship everything across. We have a bunch of Californians on site already, and our launch window opens October 29th. So we have about 5-6 weeks now to get everything ready and to go, which is hugely exciting. But as you get closer, of course, lots of hurdles still keep popping up. So we're busy that, but everybody's motivated to do this. We're really excited for Cornwall to have what is going to be the first ever launch from UK soil happen. So it's historic. But for us, it's about that inspiration piece, inspiring the next generation, inspiring and bringing aspiration to a place like Cornwall. We're working with loads of businesses down here, not space businesses, but businesses that might have an application for space. And that's the best thing about space, is it's actually not the space industry. Space crosses every other industry and business. And there's a space application for anything. So especially finance, you can't get money out of an ATM now without we're using a satellite. All the financial industries around the world now use satellites for their data. So it's, thinking, I guess, for your listeners, that space industry is not cut off to them. It is open. There's so many business opportunities. And we just see the launch as one way to enable more of those opportunities to come to the UK. And for us, at the end of the day, this is a commercial project. We have to be revenue generating. Yep. We don't want to rely on government to continue to to support it as we move forward. So we're working really hard on how we make it commercial and sustainable as well.
So do you only have Virgin as a partner, or are the other people?
Virgin are very much our anchor tenant, as we like to call them. But we have announced a partnership with another launch company called aerospace, and their technology is really cool. It takes off vertically like almost a shuttle, and it goes up to space, delivers people or products, and picks up other things from space and brings them back down. We'll be their landing site. So that's up and coming. But I think for us, the real benefit to all of this is the supply chain, the cluster growth that's happening around the site now. We have attracted so many other businesses just on the back of being a spaceport. People love it. They want to be part of it. And we're building new facilities, office space, lab space, collaboration space. And that office building is done in February, and it's probably full already, just with other businesses that want to co-locate. So
hugely exciting.
Yeah.
Wow. What's the ultimate goal?
So again, going back to us being slightly different as a spaceport, we are hugely purpose-driven, and I think for business these days, that gives you that edge. If you really believe in what you're doing and you have that purpose and that vision, that's going to bring you a success that's different than just money. And so for us to get through the really big challenges, the pressure, the expectation on us as a team, our purpose, which is good space. So we have a filter as a team, is that good space? Whether that's the satellite that we're launching, is it doing something good for humanity or our
Okay.
planet? Is that contractor we're working with treating the site with respect? Is the catering that's coming in made from sustainable, it crosses everything that we do as a team. Because then what you feel when you come to our site and when you launch with us is that responsibility to be doing it for the right reasons. We don't want to launch things that we don't believe in or that are not going to be beneficial and that are adding to problems on our planet or space debris, for instance. So we want to be the most responsible and ethical place to launch to space from anywhere in the world. Wow. And the only way we can do that is from right the food we're eating as a team to right up to the people we're working with who are launching satellites. They've got to hit that good space purpose. And that's the motivation for us that gets us through. Was, the first time ever that anybody's done this.
It sounds like most businesses should do that as a norm, as a standard. I know they don't, but that's an amazing sort of checklist or balance as you go through with that purpose.
Yeah, I think purpose-driven business is becoming, it is becoming a bigger thing because it gives you that motivation every single day to get up and go out because it's intrinsic, it's inside of you. Just solely going out to try and make as much money as possible, it feels old school now to do that. Yep. If you're really wanting to make that money, you're going to get your customers and you're going to get what you need if you're really, I guess, authentic about it and about why you're doing so. That's what sets you apart. Yeah. We have never launched yet. We are up against places that have been doing it for 50 years, with NASA and SpaceX. Yet I still get invited to speak alongside them because I'm saying something that sounds so foreign when I'm talking about, values and ethics in space. So it's set us apart, that purpose, and it's really got us noticed, and it's opened doors for us, and it's actually led us to help, impact positively in the space industry, write regulations that look after our environment and the communities around these spaceports is fundamentally changing the way that the industry is going. And I think for any business, having a think about, what is your true purpose? What do you feel good about with your business? If you can really focus everything around that, then it will come through everything that you do. And that's what's worked for us. Anyways.
Fantastic.
If you can do it in space, then you can do it in your business.
You can do it anywhere. Fantastic. Thanks ever so much for coming in today, Melissa. It's been fantastic. Thank you. And as I predicted, probably one of the most dynamic podcasts we've ever had. And thank you for coming in, Melissa. And British Business Podcast, until next time.